Praise be Jesus Christ and Mary Immaculate. Welcome to this 30th Sunday in Ordinary Time. We're going to read from the Gospel of Luke chapter 18, verses 9 through 14. Jesus is continuing his teaching on prayer. And today he gives us two examples, two ways of approaching God in prayer. That of the Pharisee, that of the tax collectors. And Jesus addressed this parable to those who were convinced of their own righteousness and despised everyone else. People who put their trust in their own efforts, in their own actions, who keep track of the good things that they do, who keep track of their own righteousness. They find justification not in God, not in the mercy of God, not in the goodness of God, but in themselves. And these we call Pharisees. And Pharisees were lay people who strive to live out all the precepts, all the laws that were attributed to the law of Moses. At the time of Jesus, these were about 613. And Pharisees strived to live these out because they just weren't happy being adequate. They weren't happy being satisfied or being average. They always wanted to exceed, but not to give God glory, but to give themselves glory, to justify themselves. And the other was a tax collector. And a tax collector was one that worked for the occupying Romans of their time, for the occupying government. It was a person that had to collect taxes, and in order to survive, collected more than they needed, and therefore they defrauded people, they cheated people, they asked for more than they needed, but that was their job. And they were despised by others, and they were seen as outside of the salvation of God. Both men went into the temple to pray. The Pharisee took up his position and spoke this prayer to himself. He does not direct his prayer to God because he doesn't need God. He thinks he's justified by simply following all the precepts and commands from God. So he doesn't even direct his prayer to God because he doesn't need God. Oh God, I thank you that I am not like the rest of humanity, greedy, dishonest, adulterous. Isn't it interesting that it's the religious people who are so condemning of others? That it's religious people who have no problem judging other people, naming other people, calling out people by their sins. It's these religious, pious people of yesterday and today that are so quick to judge, so quick to condemn, so quick to expel, so quick to excommunicate, so quick to just condemn people and be prejudiced people, all in the name of God, which God never does. And he even calls out the tax collector. And listen to how he justifies himself. I fast twice a week and I pay tithes on my whole income. This is what I'm saying about Pharisees. They could never be average. They could never be adequate. They always wanted to exceed. God never asked for anyone to fast twice a week. God asked his people to fast on one day of the year, which was the Day of Atonement. And this guy, he fasts twice a week, once on Monday and on Thursday. Monday because it commemorated the day that Moses went up to Mount Sinai to pray with God and to speak with God. And on Thursdays, because it was the day that Moses came down from Mount Sinai. But God never asked people to fast on those days. This was just his way of exceeding. And God did ask for tithes and monies on paying 10% on certain goods, but not on everything. It was only on very specific goods. And yet this man says, I pay tithes on my whole income. I don't just pay what I need to. I go beyond. I go beyond what no one does because he wants to be exceeding, but to justify himself. The tax collector did something very different. The tax collector came and stood at a distance. He was used to being kept at a distance. He was used to being kept far away from God because that's the message he received from the religious leaders, from his religion, and from the people who were around them. So from a distance, he prayed to God. He wouldn't even raise his eyes to heaven, but he beat his breast and he prayed. No, this is what we do when we come to Eucharist and we celebrate Mass. Through my fault, through my fault, through my most grievous fault. We put ourselves in the place of this tax collector. O God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Show mercy to me. Please understand me. What a different attitude it is for this tax collector than to the Pharisee. No? Because for the Pharisee, they believe and they assume that they are justified because of their obedience to the laws and to the decrees. And God is not moved by our merits. We've already been shown this. God is not moved by our merits, but he is moved by our needs. And the more that we express our need, the more God moves towards us. A perfect example of somebody who has seen the secret of this is St. Paul. St. Paul in the Acts of the Apostles and in the letter to the Philippians chapter 3 describes that he too was a Pharisee and a son of a Pharisee, and that he was very obedient to the law, and in obedience to the law no one could compete with him. But he also said that when he discovered in his own flesh the mercy and the love and the compassion of God, everything else for him he considered as rubbish. God bless you.